My name is Tom, and my life has never been easy, especially when it comes to my relationship with my mother-in-law. From the day I married my beloved Jessica, Evelyn, her mother and I could never see eye to eye. Evelyn was one of those women who always know better. She constantly criticized me, my lifestyle, my work, and even the way I dress. It seemed that no matter what I did, she didn't like it. "Tom, did you forget to buy milk again? How can you be so absent-minded?" she would grumble every time we came to visit her. "Tom, are you working late again? When will you start paying attention to your family?" She would complain whenever I stayed late at work. I tried to keep my cool and not react to her jabs, but sometimes my patience would simply snap. We would argue until we were hoarse, accusing each other of all mortal sins, until Jessica separated us like naughty kittens. "Mom, stop it! Tom is a good husband and father. He's doing his best," my wife would defend me. "Oh, Jessie, honey, you're too kind to him. I just want you to be happy," Evelyn would sigh, throwing me withering looks. And so our family life went on, in endless quarrels and squabbles. I dreamed of the day when Evelyn and I could communicate normally, without descending into mutual reproaches. But each new meeting only confirmed that she and I were from different worlds. However, life, as we know, is full of surprises. And one of those surprises was waiting for me at the family celebration in honor of Jessica's birthday. Who would have thought that this day would become a turning point in my relationship with Evelyn? Jessica's birthday party was in full swing. Guests were having fun, music was playing, waiters were serving drinks and snacks. I stood to the side sipping beer and observing the general merriment. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that Evelyn was passionately arguing with Bob, our neighbor. Snippets of their conversation reached me. They seemed to be discussing politics. "No, Bob, you're wrong. This reform will only worsen the situation for the middle class." Evelyn was getting heated, waving her arms. "Nonsense, Evelyn. Our president knows what he's doing. Believe me, in a couple of years we'll all be living better," Bob parried with a grin. I chuckled to myself. Bob had always been a stubborn conservative and a fan of the current president. And Evelyn, as far as I knew, held more liberal views. Suddenly, I approached them and interjected into the conversation. "Actually, Evelyn is right, Bob. This reform is just a populist move that won't lead to anything good." Evelyn looked at me in surprise, but then her face lit up. It seemed that for the first time in my life, I had taken her side. For the next half hour, Evelyn and I passionately argued with Bob, bringing up more and more arguments. We complimented each other, deftly parrying our opponent's points. It was like some strange dance, a dance of kindred spirits who suddenly realized they were on the same side of the barricades. In the end, Bob gave up, acknowledging our superiority. And Evelyn and I looked at each other and laughed, feeling something like mutual affection for the first time. "Tom, I had no idea you were so well-versed in politics," Evelyn said, looking at me with respect. "Well, there's a lot I don't know about you either, Evelyn," I smiled. "Maybe we should talk more often about neutral topics." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully, and I felt the ice between us beginning to melt. Who knows? Maybe this argument would be the beginning of a new era in our relationship. After that memorable argument, my relationship with Evelyn began to change little by little. No, we didn't suddenly become best friends, but there was clear progress. Now, every time I came to visit her, I didn't feel like I was in a minefield. We could have normal conversations, discussing the latest news, books, or movies. It turned out we had much more in common than we thought. Imagine, Tom, I just read an amazing book about travel. There are so many interesting facts, I just couldn't put it down, Evelyn would share with me over a cup of tea. Yes, I also love reading about different countries. Maybe we should take a family trip somewhere sometime, I would suggest. Evelyn would smile and nod, and I could see that she liked my idea. Jessica was also happy about our thawing relationship and supported our communication in every way. Gradually, our meetings became more frequent and less formal. We could easily go to the movies or the park together, chatting about everything. I even started giving Evelyn rides to work when her car broke down. One day, when we were sitting in a cafe after another movie outing, I suddenly caught myself admiring Evelyn. The way she smiled, the way she fixed her hair, the way she laughed at my jokes. At that moment, it was as if a spark had passed between us, but I tried to push those thoughts away. After all, She was my wife's mother. What kind of nonsense was going through my head? But from that day on, something imperceptibly changed. I began to pay more attention to Evelyn, noticing little things that had previously escaped my gaze. And sometimes it seemed to me that she was looking at me in a special way, with warmth and a slight flirtation. However, I attributed it to my imagination. I probably just got out of the habit of normal human communication with my mother-in-law, so I was making things up. And besides, we both had families. What sparks could there be? If only I knew how wrong I was. That day I was tinkering with my car in the garage as usual. The old Chevy had been acting up more often lately, and I was trying to bring it back to life. Suddenly, Jessica walked into the garage with some kind of folder in her hands. "Honey, could you go to Mom's and give her these documents? It's very urgent, and I have a ton of things to do at work today," she smiled guiltily. "Of course, dear, no problem," I nodded, wiping my hands with a rag. "I'll just change and go." Half an hour later, I was already standing on the doorstep of Evelyn's house. She opened the door and looked at me in surprise. "Tom, did something happen?" No, everything is fine. Jess just asked me to give you some documents," I smiled, handing her the folder. "Oh, thank you. Come in. Don't stand on the doorstep," Evelyn fussed, letting me inside. We went to the kitchen and Evelyn put the kettle on. Time flew by unnoticed with conversations and jokes. We talked about little things, but every look, every word had a special meaning. Suddenly she laughed, and I noticed how her eyes lit up with warmth and tenderness. That laugh was like a melody, awakening something long forgotten in me. She leaned over to take a cup, and our faces were very close to each other. I felt her warm breath and saw how tenderly her lips trembled. My heart froze for a moment and then started beating faster, filling me with an irresistible desire. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Apparently, Evelyn felt the same, because she was the first to reach for me and press her lips to mine. It was so unexpected and at the same time so pleasant that I momentarily lost touch with reality. We kissed greedily, passionately, as if trying to quench a years-long thirst. Hands roamed over each other's bodies, exploring, caressing. At some point, we found ourselves in the bedroom where our passion reached its peak. Reality ceased to matter. Only our entwined bodies and the frantic beating of our hearts remained. We made love as if tomorrow didn't exist. It was like a supernova explosion, bright, blinding, incinerating. But as soon as it was over, the realization of what had happened hit us. We lay next to each other, breathing heavily and not looking at each other. Evelyn was the first to break the silence. "Tom, what have we done? This is terrible. We shouldn't have—" I was silent, not knowing what to say. Conflicting feelings were struggling inside me, guilt, shame, but at the same time, some strange satisfaction. "Evelyn, listen, I don't know how this happened, but we can't just pretend that nothing happened," I finally squeezed out. "No, Tom, that's exactly what we'll do," Evelyn said sternly, sitting up on the bed. "Nothing happened. It was a mistake, a momentary weakness, and we must forget about it for the sake of our families." I understood that she was right. We had no future. We couldn't hurt Jessica and the rest of our relatives. It was just an affair, a flash of passion, nothing more. "Okay, Evelyn, you're right. We'll keep this a secret and never bring it up." I nodded, starting to get dressed. We exchanged a long look as we said goodbye, a mixture of sadness, regret, and understanding. And then I left, feeling my skin burning in the places where Evelyn's hands had touched it. The next few days passed as if in a fog. I tried to act as usual, went to work, talked to Jessica, played with the kids. But it was as if a stranger had settled inside me, a man who had made an unforgivable mistake, who had betrayed his wife, his family, his principles, and who, despite everything, couldn't stop thinking about that moment of intimacy with Evelyn. Memories of it haunted me everywhere. Her scent, her moans, her touches, all of it was right in front of my eyes as soon as I closed my eyelids. I felt like the last scoundrel, but I couldn't help myself. However, I was determined to keep my word to Evelyn. No matter what happened between us, it would not happen again. We agreed to forget about everything and move on, and I was going to follow that plan. So at the next family dinner, I acted as if nothing had happened. I joked, laughed, discussed various topics with the guests. Evelyn also tried to be casual, although I noticed how she furtively threw tense glances at me. At one point, we accidentally found ourselves alone in the kitchen. There was an awkward pause. The air seemed to be charged with electricity. I frantically tried to think of something to say, but all the words had vanished somewhere. "Tom, we shouldn't," Evelyn began, but I interrupted her. "I know, Evelyn, and we won't. Let's just pretend that nothing happened, for the sake of our families." She nodded, and for a moment it seemed to me that there was sadness in her eyes. But the next second, Evelyn was already smiling and offering me a taste of her signature apple pie. I sighed with relief. It seems we would both handle this. We just needed to keep our distance and not give in to temptation. Life slowly returned to its usual course. Evelyn and I saw each other less and less, and each of our meetings was pointedly polite and cool, as if the spark that had flared between us had gone out, leaving no trace. Only sometimes, looking at Evelyn, I would catch her strange, almost wistful gaze, and in those moments I wanted to spit on all the prohibitions, go up to her and hug her, bury my face in her hair, inhaling the familiar scent. But I immediately drove those thoughts away. We had an agreement, and I was going to keep it. After all, too much was at stake. My family, my marriage, my whole life. So I continued to play my role. A loving husband, a caring father, an exemplary son-in-law. And I tried not to think about what I really wanted. Weeks passed, turning into months. Gradually, the sharpness of the experience smoothed out, and I learned to live with this burden on my heart. Memories of my night with Evelyn faded, turning into a distant, almost unreal dream. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that I missed our former closeness. Not the physical one, no. Rather, that amazing kinship of souls that had arisen between us over these months. The conversations, the laughter, the understanding with half a word. But I knew that this would be better. For all of us. You can't build happiness on deception and betrayal. It never leads to anything good. So I just lived on, worked, raised children, loved Jessica. And from time to time, I would take out those precious moments spent with Evelyn from my memory, carefully going through them like rare pearls. Maybe in another life, in another universe, something could have worked out between us. But here and now, all we can do is keep our feelings deep in our hearts and move forward. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.